Welcome to the final episode of our 5-part podcast series from Colegau Cymru, where we've been looking at each of the 5 themes of our policy asks for the next Welsh Government. Today we'll be discussing the 5th theme, which looks at an FE workforce that is fit for the future. We're calling on the next Welsh Government to think about a variety of issues, including the approach to professional learning in further education, looking at the professional standards and qualifications for teaching in FE, how a version of qualified teacher status could work for FE, the future role of the Education Workforce Council, and how we could enhance the dual professional system. For the full text of our policy asks, please visit our website, colegau.cymru. My name is Kelly Edwards, and I'm Director of Development at Colegau Cymru. Joining us to discuss this further is Iarna Williams, Chief Executive of Coleg Cambria, Mark Dacey, Group Chief Executive of NPTC Group, and Andrew Cornish, Principal and Chief Executive of Coleg Sir Gar and Coleg Ceredigion. Welcome and thank you all for joining us. Andrew, if I could start with you, if I could ask you, how do you think that Welsh Government can build on the approach to the new curriculum for Wales by supporting further professionalisation of the FE workforce?
Well, of course, the Curriculum for Wales is a really exciting initiative. It's a step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. It's a skills-based, essentially a skills-based curriculum. And I think in terms of the further professionalisation of the FE workforce, I think the Welsh Government could help by encouraging further education institutions to develop their professional learning even further and to engage in more action research to enhance teaching and learning practice. I think that's really, really important that takes place. And of course, the transition barrier around 16, when you move from pre to post-16 learning, the qualifications are going to be slightly different, and how learners are going to be assessed is going to be slightly different, pre-16 to post-16. So I think the Welsh Government has a role there in terms of supporting that transition of the learner and supporting colleges to engage with the idea of professional learning moving forward. I think it's really important that professional learning doesn't only take place in schools, and it really can be used to enhance vocational education and training. And a lot of colleges are already engaging in action research, which is informing vocational education and training, and is really having an impact in the classroom and the workshop. And I also believe working with further education to raise the profile of professional learning as an initiative in the sector with both employees and other stakeholders is really, really important, because particularly for vocational education, which is linked, inextricably with employment, then having employers understanding what professional learning is and how they can engage in action research to inform teaching and learning practice is really, really important. And I also think some consideration should be sent up to have a fully funded professional learning network to drive and embed the initiative across further education in Wales. So those are my ideas really in terms of how we can further professionalise the FE workforce and how the Welsh Government can help us and support us with that, particularly linked to professional learning.
Thanks for that, Andrew. Mark, can I come to you? Do you hold similar views?
Yeah, I do hold similar views. I think the new curriculum for Wales, without being critical, it is about time, really. I mean, we're talking about a curriculum that's been in place since 1989. And to put that into context, that's when we had the first £2 million transfer in football. Things have moved on since that time. And I think what we've had in the FE sector over that period of time is tremendous change within the curriculum through GMBQ, through the MBQ system itself. And I think what we've lived through in that period of time is constant change. In fact, the only constant has been changed in the curriculum. And I think when we talk then about professional learning within further education, I think the amount of professional learning that has gone on in further education during that period of time is absolutely incredible, to be honest, because that happens year after year after year. I think putting that into a framework would certainly help, because it has been, sometimes a little bit ad hoc, depending upon some of the changes that the curriculum has required over that period of time. We have within our contracts of employment an allocated time of days, number of days of CPD that teachers engage in. And to be honest, when we are talking about vocational areas, and in the last 30 years, vocational areas have changed tremendously. So our staff keeping up to date with changes in changes in technology, but also changes in the industry themselves, means that our staff are updating almost on a weekly basis for some of the changes in legislation, covering some of the vocational sectors. And I think really to formalise that, I think would be a real positive approach to recognise the amount of work that our staff actually put into their own professional learning and have done over that period of time. And yes, of course, we have the PGCE. We have a qualification within the sector, and it does, I suppose, raise an issue about dual qualification, and I know you're going to come on to that, but I do think that it is a particular issue for the FE sector, where somebody with QTS status can teach within the FE sector, and somebody with a PGCE in post-16 education couldn't teach within the pre-16 sector. And I have to say, both sectors are very, very different. And I do think that recognising the enormous amount of professional learning that takes place in our sector is definitely a positive way forward for raising the profile of the incredible work that our staff do on a yearly basis. So 100% be behind this as a policy.
Thanks, Mark. And Jana, do you agree? What's your view on what we've been covering around professionalisation in the FE sector?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. I think there are four, I suppose, full-time sectors, as there were: primary, secondary, FE and university. And if you think of the other three outside of FE, there are very clear, sort of expectations in terms of the qualifications. And while we do have the PGCE, you'll often see our own students aspiring to go and be primary school teachers or secondary school teachers, or work in university and develop their doctorate professorism to sort of stay there. But very rarely will you hear someone wanting to go into FE, and I think it's about standardising those qualifications almost and investing in them. And I think that was the key thing Mark sort of picked up: investing in the things we do now, but making them really relevant so people see it as a career choice to be in. And I think ensuring that we've got the funding to make sure our staff who want to come into the sector and impart these vocational skills, very high qualification skills they've got, skills they've often learned and want to bring from the workplace, but identifying how we can utilise them, support them to ensure that those skills are reinforced as high-level qualifications that could be used in other places as well. And we know that those skills are important when we're teaching things like 14 to 16-year-olds in schools, because they deliver those vocational qualifications that can't be delivered anywhere else. So I'd really reinforce the fact that that investment and those standards should be developed and supported moving forward.
Thanks, Jana. And Andrew, could I ask you about the professional standards and how you think we could make use of them in FE?
Well, I was so pleased when, first of all, FE joined the Education Workforce Council as members, teaching staff and support staff, and obviously the professional standards developed as a consequence of that. But certainly, colleges across Wales, will use the professional standards to self-evaluate their teaching and learning performance against those professional standards. I think many colleges across Wales do that now. But they could also be used for a number of other different processes in college, for example, to stimulate debate, professional debate. They could be used as a focus for action research or indeed inquiry. They can be inspiration for specific training that teachers and support staff need. And it could also be used, the professional standards, as a framework for progression. And it's perhaps something which is going to develop, I think, in the sector next, and how we can use those professional standards to aid, teacher progression moving forward. It can be a guide for induction. So, for example, you've got the professional standard. When a new member of staff comes in, they're assigned to EWC, and they can be monitored against those standards in terms of their performance during the induction process. And they're also an aid memoir or an expectation of what we expect from teachers, in the further education sector. So just some ideas really there as to how those standards can be used beyond what I would call the norm, and that's about evaluating performance and measuring performance against standards that have been set.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. We've talked about dual professionalism. Jana, I wondered how you think QTS and the dual professional model could be applied in FE?
Yeah, I think particularly obviously in our vocational areas, I think for some areas it's easier than others. I think, for example, we have very much real working environments within the college where we already have members of staff who are full-time doing that job. So catering, for example, full-time chefs within there, or we will have full-time hairdressers who are also supporting students. So almost while they're doing the job, they're supporting students as well. So almost have that dual professionalism going on. I think it's very difficult, or more difficult, to do it in professions where we're not doing that. So actually we're setting up much more mock environments and requiring people to upskill. But I think in terms of the QTS, it's about that upskilling of those brand new skills that we're bringing into students. And that's part of that dual professionalism, the ability to work with an employer where the skills are really relevant, they're really new, and you're learning how to do new skills and apply them. The construction industry is a really good example of constantly using new skills in construction and how we impart them within a framework that our students are working to. So I think building both in, ensuring that we can either train people within and with an employer to support us so we can get those skills while working with an employer, or get our own staff who are already qualified, for example, to work with employers and learn those skills, all benefits the students in the long term. But it's about how we ensure that dual professionalism ensures that when our students leave, they're absolutely ready to go into the workplace and know those new skills, even if they're not within that curriculum necessarily. And I think the training and working together would be really, really positive. The challenge is how we get every single sector within our vocational delivery areas to get to the same sort of standards. As I said, I think it's easier in some qualifications and some standards and some employment than it is in others.
Okay, thanks, Jana. Mark, you've touched upon QTS and dual professionalism. I wondered if you had anything to add about how this could be applied in FE?
Yeah, I think so. The thing that we have that is very different within the FE sector, and both Andrew and Jana have touched upon it, is that we already have people who are dual qualified in the sector. So, for example, and Jana mentioned the construction industry there, I am a chartered surveyor by profession. I still have to keep that registration. I still have to undertake my continuing professional development to keep the FRICS title that I have. And there are many, many staff within further education who have chartered status and are members of professional bodies which support their vocational background. These people have already undertaken, PGCE, so they're post-16 qualified teachers, as well as being vocationally qualified, and sometimes at a very high level, both at postgraduate and doctorate level within the sector. And that's an expectation within the sector. So that transition from being able to teach within a post-16 sector to being able to teach under QTS status as well, an open qualification, I think is something which has to come, because we are not talking about lesser qualified people within the further education sector. We're talking about people who are probably far more qualified within the sector, because they do already hold dual qualifications. So I think it's something that the staff are used to. And, I think something that the transition via QTS would help, certainly in terms of the professional standing of further education lecturers, who may sometimes be perceived, because of QTS status, as being something less than teachers in the compulsory education sector, in the same way as sometimes university lecturers are seen as being I wouldn't say unqualified, but actually unregulated in terms of that sector. So, I don't see this as being a huge step forward. I see it as being a very necessary step forward, to be honest.
Thanks, Mark. And Andrew, do you have anything to add about how the dual professional system might be enhanced?
Well, I have, but before I come on to that, can I just talk a little bit about QTS, or QLS as I call it, Qualified Lecturing Status, and building on what Mark says, what he finished with there, I was thinking as he was speaking is, I believe it's a real necessity that we move forward with, qualified status. And, if you think about how QTS happens in school, where you've got, first of all, you've got to provide evidence to meet the professional standards that you've engaged with as a practitioner. But also then the practice is monitored over a period of time, whether that's through observation of lessons or other vehicles. And I think there's a real, we could make real good use of internal and external mentors across the sector to be able to come to a decision whether somebody's reached QTS or QLS. I think that's vital for the sector moving forward, personally. And I think Mark touched on it a little bit earlier as well, is the development of post-16 specific PGCs, which I think really need to be contextualized to include vocational technical nuances that do occur in the post-16 sector. In terms of the dual professional system, I think this is something which could be really exciting for the sector. Some of the things that Jana mentioned, the currency in the workplace being realized in college, and also some of the, the methods that we're using in college, perhaps going into the workplace as well. Those new methods of learning and training imparted to the workforce in both institutions, I think, is critical to have currency. We often forget it's the development of people's personal skills as well, which is really important, and how they develop as people when they go into different environments, and that can only benefit both employers and trainers. And I think the links between education and employers, and there are many of those, a plethora of them across the FE sector, but it really would enhance the understanding of each other's wants and needs as well, moving forward, and would even lead to further development of the curriculum. There's a lot of work done across the sector in developing the curriculum to meet the needs of employers, but actually having people embedded in both institutions can only enhance that moving forward. I think what's interesting is how do we define the role of dual professionalism moving forward? Are they teachers? Are they instructors? How can we realize that? I'll give you an example. We've got priority areas such as agriculture, engineering, computing, health, where we need highly skilled, highly qualified people to come in and train and assess learners. But fundamentally, they're not teachers. They work in different areas of employment. So how can we bring them into college in a way that they wouldn't have to go through a plethora of training to be able to impart their knowledge and skills to individuals? I think that's the challenge. And the other challenge, of course, is salaries, for these people. A lot of people who work at a high level in industry earn a lot more than teachers would do. And sometimes, we've got to think about, well, if we want this to happen, how can we enhance salaries to be able to encourage those individuals to stay in work, but also to come into the college and impart their knowledge and skills as well. I think that's something that really needs to be thought about. But I think generally, I think Jana touched on this, lecturers going into industry on a secondment or regular basis is going to be vital for the future.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Can I ask one final question, really, still on the subject of the dual professional system, whether you think there are any lessons that we could learn from international examples?
Yeah, I think it picks up on Andrew's point. I think the absolutely wonderful thing about the FE sector is it's teaching people vocational skills. they're ready via, whether it's via an apprenticeship, whether it's via different levels that people go into. It teaches them skills to go out and deliver something for most of us that we need in our lives. So everything from building a house, cutting hair, making food, looking after children. It's where the FE sector sits, and it's such an important sector. But it's a sector that needs to be, and is, not only responsive to skills needs, but proactive to what's coming along the line. So there are two key things. Now, to do that, we need that dual professionalism. We need people to come into the sector and help deliver or help set up those programs so that we're absolutely responsive, delivering the skills industry needs right now, so that when our students leave, they go into, they don't have to be retrained, they go in and they're skilled up. The challenge that we have, which I think other countries do quite well at, is that where those skills are new or where they're in short supply, so we need to supply more people into that system, those people earn more money, not in education, they earn more money in the jobs they're doing because the jobs are in short supply, or they earn more money in the jobs they're doing because they're new jobs, they're new up and coming jobs. And how do you get those skills into a classroom if those skills are needed more and are paid more in industry? And I think what you find in other countries is, I think Andrew picked that up, people are paid more to come in and deliver that, are paid more within education systems because they're seen as being incredibly skilled people. So you will get in some countries, people go in, actually, if I train to be this, I get more money in education because I'm training the next level of that group of people to be those people. I'm training those professional people. So, if you think of going into university, you get people with doctorates training people who want to do masters because you get the skill level higher to train people up. And we should be able to fund that, I think. And it is a challenge that I think Andrew, it's the funding of it. How do we fund people with those amazing skills to come in and educate the future generation of that? But instead, we can't do that because those people earn more money and needed more in industry. And we've got to think how dual professionalism allows us to sort of bridge that. So it doesn't mean we take them out of industry because they're needed there, but how can we utilize them in sessions, in classes, in supporting our students, in supporting our colleges to deliver key things, which means our students are absolutely ready to go into industry with those brand new skills, but also we can set up programs that are prepared for those new skills. Whereas sometimes we're playing catch up a little bit. So I think we can look at some countries from all over the world that already do that, but that's about, I think, the fact that maybe in those countries, their view on vocational skills has a much higher level of sort of respect almost, maybe within our political industries, but also in our academic industries as well.
Yeah, Jana's spot on there. I think the salary levels of teachers and lecturers over probably the past 20 years has fallen considerably behind where they would have been 20 years ago in comparison to other similar professions. It just hasn't kept up to pace. And actually one of the key issues then is the actual professional standing of teachers and lecturers. And when we look at comparative sectors like lawyers and accountants and so on, those professionally qualified people, teachers and lecturers no longer have that standing in the community. And I think, as Jan has said, if an engineer can make a better living working in a local engineering company or a large engineering company, then why would they set their aspirations to become, a lecturer in further education if there's a limit on, what they can actually earn through there? Because at the end of the day, although it's a vocation, it has to be a vocation that can actually, support your home life, doesn't it? And I think that is an absolute key issue, and how we integrate that with the industry so that we can have sufficient periods of time in industry where people can continually update their skills. and not undermine their position in the college itself. There are so many countries that do this. I mean, you could do a quick search online and find out about things like the standing of engineers in Germany and so on and so forth. I mean, there are so many examples out there of how this works. And it is a matter of equity, I think, to be honest, because we mentioned the first couple of questions were around, professional learning and so on, and the investment in professional learning in the compulsory education sector is enormous. It is absolutely enormous. There isn't that level of funding into the post-16 sector for professional learning and to enhance that professional learning. And if we are talking about, and theme 5 within this document is about an FE workforce that is fit for the future, and we are asking, what the Welsh Government should do next to support that and to support the skills agenda, and particularly now post-Brexit and probably, if we're honest, post-COVID, if there is going to be a post-COVID, skills are going to be absolutely central to dealing with this major issue that we've got in terms of GDP and the reductions in GDP and the impact that there's been on our economy in the last 12 months through COVID. So I think as an ask to Welsh Government, we should be asking us to look at how we develop our workforce, how we can develop our workforce, integrate that workforce into industry, and also get a level of payment for our workforce which reflects the very high level skills that they bring to this sector. And it doesn't do that at the moment. And I think secondly, we should be asking Welsh Government to make significant investment in developing the CPD. So, and I think it's in response to a point that Jana made, so that we are ready for what is the next in vogue industry that we will be developing within Wales as a country. And I don't think any of us know that. And it is difficult. I mean, it's been said so many times that the top 10 in-demand jobs today didn't exist 10 years ago. So it's a difficult one. It's a bit of crystal ball gazing, isn't it? But actually, we should really have a structured and developed CPD process for everyone involved in delivering skills to the next workforce. It just makes obvious sense, doesn't it? And we don't have that at the moment.
Thanks, Mark. Would Jana or Andrew, would you have any further comments around the fifth theme that we're looking at on an FE workforce that is fit for the future?
What I will say, I mean, the FE sector is a fantastic sector to work in. It's a really dynamic, it's the go-to sector in terms of employers, in terms of, the amount of training that we do for employers as well, and how they come in and work with us to develop the curriculum moving forward. And that can only be a positive thing. I mean, the advent of Industry 4.0, the phrase Education 4.0 has been mooted, and following on from what Mark said, really, I mean, what are the jobs of the future? Those are the jobs that we don't know about yet, but there are some core things that are going to be required, and that's vocational skills and training, and digitalization to go alongside them as well. I'm quite excited by the future and the idea of dual professionalism and enhancing teaching and learning through a QTS model.
And for me, it just always fascinates me that there's an assumption about FE and its standings compared to maybe a sixth form and a university. Yet the significant amount of jobs out there come from people who trained in the FE sector. And that seems to be ignored. That, as I said earlier, the majority of people you will be in contact in on a day-to-day basis to support you in whatever you want done in your house or in your lifestyle will have come from an FE college at some point and been trained by an FE college. And I think if we want to really enhance the skills, and we talk about skills in the country, if we want to enhance them to the next level, we need to invest in FE to ensure that we invest in our own staff and we invest in employers to make sure those skills can be imparted to the next generation to take the skills up to the next level.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think so much investment in research in universities, high-end research in universities, which is great. I'm not knocking that. What I would say, though, is you can't run a country on PhDs. I mean, once the research has been undertaken, we really have to have those skilled people to actually implement the research, to install whatever new technology is being developed through this research. So if there is such a massive investment in that research, that's got to be tied back to those technically qualified people who are going to be able to actually install that, to take advantage of that research. But I mean, the funding seems to be the wrong way around to me, you know? And I say it again, you can't run a country on PhDs, unfortunately.
Thanks, Mark. I'd like to say a big thank you to our three panellists for your contribution today. You can listen to this and other podcasts in the series by visiting our website, colegau.cymru. There too, you will find our Policy Asks document and further information relating to our activities for the Senedd election 2021.